Hey guys. All right, I'm setting up this live lesson. Sorry it's a little late. I'm gonna do it from this upwards perspective because people tend to like this view better. And then I'm gonna just plug that in on my computer so I can answer some questions for you guys today. All right, now going to YouTube. This may be on something specific if any of the Patreons have left any questions on my Patreon page. So let's go look at this. Go to my posts. All right. Okay, so no questions except Robert F. asked where the link is, which I'm about to do that. I'm so sorry that it's so late. I said it was going to be 2 o'clock today, but I practice Buddhism here in LA, and there was a Buddhist meeting, and I ended up doing a session afterwards that went a lot later than I thought it was going to. So I'm here now. Hopefully I still get some of you. Let's see, my channel, live streaming now. Boom. Oh, and you can see my fuzzy hair and fuzzy jacket. All right, we have 4 people watching. Beautiful. Let's see if any, okay, so if you guys have questions, I'll start by answering any questions that are here, even if you're not a Patreon member. But I'm going to put this link up in the Patreon campaign in case, so I can give priorities to people who are members. In fact, I'm going to make a new post here on the Patreon page that is for patrons only. Let's say live streaming now. Write any questions here and I'll answer them. There's the live stream link. Publish. Okay, all my patrons should be able to see that. What's up? Blackadoose? Is that how you say that? What does that mean? M2AX? Sounds like a DJ name. Alright. So maybe we'll just start by talking about some things. The one post that I was going to do, that I might still do, is like, oh, how to solo. Ivan Wright. Okay, cool. By the way, I guess I have a new Patreon member now. I have to see who that is, but whoever that is, thank you so much. You must have signed up today because it's at a higher amount. If any of you guys want to join the Patreon campaign, I really appreciate it. It helps me continue to do these things, and it's, here, I'll put it in the chat here. Patreon.com/weeklypiano. And I do these live lessons every Sunday, usually at 11 a.m., but I'm late today. Sorry about that. And I'll answer questions. I give priority to the people on the Patreon campaign if you have questions, and there's a link that I gave to all the patrons where you can ask questions. But for now, until patrons ask questions, I'll answer these. So we've got this soloing. There are so many different types of soloing that we could talk about, and there are different styles, and I tend to be focused on the jazz idiom, but like there are like, I mean, we could talk about shit, my hands are not warmed up right now. That's jazz soloing, so for Ivan, and there are a lot of different layers to learn to actually get there, where you can express a voice and be creative in a jazz solo. But maybe, Ivan, tell me a little bit in this chat about where you are in your playing, and then I can speak more specifically to you, because I can tell you the basics. You need your modes. I started on a G minor, and you have to know the G Dorian mode. But which is actually F. Greetings, Ted Eleni, from Germany. But anyway, so the F major. There's the F major mode. What is it? Ionian? I think Ionian. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. There are a bunch of pianists here. I think that's Ionian, is major, because Aeolian is natural minor. So you need to know that mode, and that mode transfers, because when you go to G minor, it's still F major, but starting from G to G, and C, 5 is still F major, but starting from C and ending in C, and F is obviously F major. So when you're doing ideas, those ideas, I sort of always have the root in my mind when I'm expressing ideas, even in other keys. Ionian. Thanks, Rachel. Rachel, you've been on this a lot lately. I really appreciate it. Now, see, when I do lines like that, they stand on their own without having to go through the changes. You're welcome, Giles. Davud? I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, that is, so the lines that you play when you learn to go through these different modes, and you learn this is your G minor, this is your C7, and this is your F, you're gonna eventually transcend that movement and think melodically in your root key. At least that's how I do it. And if you listen to the great pianists like Keith Jarrett, it seems like that's how they're doing it. Their melodies stand on their own in F. Like, there's a motif, this is a motif, this is a motif, this is that same motif, and you can go through those changes and be using that motif all over the place, thinking in F major, and understanding the leading tones that then lead you to your other keys as you're swimming through this harmonic landscape. Or harmonic river, I should call it, if I'm using the swimming analogy. And you notice what I did there? I did an idea, and then an answer to that. And that last one was also sort of a question. And it's hard to say exactly why they're questions and why they're answers. Like, except for the analogy to speech. A lot of this has an analogy to speech. So if you go downwards, it's an answer. If it goes upwards, it's a question. But that last one, I played that, and it was kind of still a question. Probably because it was the opposite of everything else that I had done before. Like, that's up. So that's sort of a question, and then that's another question with the same motif pulling up and up. Now this has to answer somewhere, and there are actually a few reasons why that could be heard as like a larger question. You had question, answer, but the whole thing was still a question, because that sounds like a question when it is put into the context of those two other motifs, probably because it's the opposite of those, and it makes you feel like you're going to be moving forward. And also the fact that it ends on the 5. It's easy to feel that that is more of a question. It needs to be followed up with something if you end on the 5. Like, that feels like it needs to be followed up. Whereas if I go, that sounds like an answer, because it landed on the 1. So you could effectively use that as a question and an answer. I'm making it very simple right now, because a lot of the times there's much more compounded complexity here, because we're expressing intuitively in the end. But these are aspects that are important to understand, because if you don't understand them, you're just going to play a bunch of random shit, like... Like, it makes no sense. You're just playing notes and scales. That's what most people do. But the the brilliance is in the specificity of it, and the emotional content comes from the specificity of creating a piece of vocabulary and saying something with it, even if it's as simple as a cell, as a 3-note cell, like one. Let's just say 1, 2, 3, right? So, and let's just say 1, 2, 3 in whole steps. Let's be very specific. What you do with that 1, 2, 3 in whole steps. I was constraining myself very strictly there to only use clusters of 3 whole notes wherever it lies, but because I was using that as my piece of vocabulary and being specific with it, it was saying something. And then I was also using other concepts that I talk about, like goal notes, super, super important. I have several videos on that. And contour, and then melodic specificity, which is a more abstracted concept, but you can get better at that by doing the octave exercise, the 1 octave exercise for the people who really know me, the 5 to 5, where you create melodies just within the 5 to 5 context. Anyway, I've gone on a little bit. I'm going to read a few more of these questions, but first I'm going to check the Patreon page, make sure, give priority to the supporters, but the supporters are quiet right now, so let's make this public. All right, so let's see. Ivan, you were saying that you used to practice modes but didn't know how to project them in your solos. Oh, well, the mode is just a landscape. The mode isn't even anything you project. It's just a constraint. Like, let's talk about so what. So you're using D Dorian. That's your landscape. You're not projecting anything. You're just using it. It's a tool. So now within the context of that, you use the same thing I was talking about earlier, which is melodic specificity, motivic development. So let's just say the same exact motif I used before, the 1, 1, 2, the 3 whole steps, which is going to be harder here because if you start on the 1, you have the major. So we're going to have to go out a little bit. We're only going to use that motif, so maybe I'll adjust it, but let's see. This is obviously, there's not so much you can do if you stick with something that's that rigid, but let's say I do that, but I also allow myself to use a half step in there. So it's either 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, flat 3. Now, I have the whole mode available to me because all the clusters are fit into that, and I can go out if I want to, but I'm also thinking of something specific that I'm using in my solo. So I'm using this mode, D Dorian mode, right? And I know when I'm out of it, I know when I'm in it. So now I can go up even more. Let's make that my goal note. obviously I strayed off a little bit there. But what I was doing is I was starting just with using that motif or that motif. It was just that or that, and you can flip it upside down. That's flipped upside down. You can use it anywhere on the keyboard, and then use it to say something by compounding it with ideas like the goal note. That was my goal note. And you know, for those of you who know So What, when I was going upwards, I was when the tune goes up to E flat, and if that's your goal note, you can use that as your goal note still when you're in E flat, but now it has a different context because it used to be the 7, the flat 7, and now it's the natural 6, which is a much more dissonant note in the Dorian scale because it has a tritone with the 3. That's that. I'm going to read a couple more of these things, questions from people, and I'll pick the one that is easiest for me to answer right now because some of these might require more time. So, Ivan, yes, transcribing jazz pianists helps so much. You have to. In fact, watch my last video that I did, the 110-minute practice schedule, which I did for one of my students just recently, and I thought it was applicable enough to do a video on. I think I uploaded it yesterday. Go back and watch that because I talk about transcribing and that it's very, very important. I would recommend a half hour a day. If you can put in 110 minutes, 30 minutes of that should be transcribing. And really, really dive in when you're transcribing. Like, do one solo for months. Like, a half hour a day for months. Get the whole solo, write it out, learn to play it, and analyze it. And then if you can, if you have the time and energy and patience, then move it up a half step. It'll be so good. I've never really finished that exercise in my life, but I've done like parts of it, and it's always helped. If you can do more of it, more power to you. It takes a lot of focus and concentration. Can I talk more about Keith Jarrett? Well, what do you want to know about Keith Jarrett? He's probably the greatest living pianist. He speaks through the piano in a way that is at the very least different and on that highest level with other pianists like Herbie. And his mentality is different than other pianists as well. Keith is more virtuosic than any other pianist. As far as technicality goes, he plays the entire Bach catalog, which is so fucking hard. I've played a lot of, well, not a lot. I've played some Bach, and I still practice every day in my 2-hour practice routine that I have. I play Bach. I play like the. That piece. I do that every day when I can. Actually, I haven't for like 3 days, so that's why my chops are not very good right now. But Keith Jarrett, when you listen to his playing, he uses all the things that I'm talking about more so than any other pianist I can name. He always has ideas, motivic development, goal notes, melodic specificity. He has dynamic contour. He has phrasing. His phrasing is incredible. And you can draw certain things from what that ends up being in the end when all those things are put together, which is, it feels like you feel the key center the whole time, unless he's playing atonal, which he does. But like I was saying, if I'm just doing a 2-5-1 exercise, if you were listening to Keith Jarrett, I feel like, oh, thank you, Frank. I feel like when he's playing, I hear the F major all the time, no matter what's going on, no matter what, unless it's harmonically shifting to like a different key or whatever. But if it's on like the 2 5 1 6 in F minor, which you can hear in a lot of his tunes, he did the whole standards thing. Like that's a 2 5 1, but it doesn't sound like a 2 5 1. I mean, I know I have that. I have the leading note into the G and all that, but it stands on its own as something using F major with a passing tone, with a chromatic passing tone. It doesn't. It could be 2 5 1, or it could be just F major. Okay, Ivan, I'll save this one. Yeah, that's my thoughts on Keith Jarrett. Let me read some of these other questions. Am I actually hearing the ideas while playing, or just kind of feeling it? I'm hearing the ideas. So that's another thing, and I struggle with this myself when I'm playing. There's the idea. When I'm really in it, I'm noticing that I'm speaking, and when I'm noticing that I'm speaking, I notice the words I'm saying. It's like I can speak. I'm speaking to you right now. Did somebody just give me money? Can you do that here? That's hilarious. Thank you. Wow, George Maddox. I really appreciate that. I didn't know that was a thing you could do on YouTube. I guess I just made money. That's amazing. I thought you could only do that through Patreon. Thank you, George. You taught me something new today, and you gave me $5. I'll go get a coffee after this. Anyway, wait, there was a specific question that was really good that I was just talking about before I got distracted by becoming a little richer. Oh, am I thinking melodically? Am I thinking about the motifs when I'm playing them? So yes, it's something that when I play, I'm trying to speak from my soul, and that means so many different things to so many different people. But when you're doing that, you are using when you're speaking. You're speaking. That's the nature of speech, is you have vocabulary and you're using it to say something. And this is emotional content that we're portraying when we speak, so it's very abstracted, which is why it can be skated over, and so many players can make a great living saying absolutely nothing and making people think that they're good when they're not. But when you are saying something that is clear, and granted, let me to that point, I don't always play good. I've played shows where I've finished the show and have said, I just said absolutely nothing. And I've played shows where I've finished the show and said that was a spiritual experience, and I feel like I said something so specific, and even though it was abstracted, it was an emotional portrayal that was portrayed by the vocabulary that I created, which were the ideas, and what I said about those ideas, and and you're not just saying things about the ideas, you're saying things about the context too. So, that wasn't a great idea, but you could hear idea, progression, idea, progression with a little bit of a conclusion, but it was kind of a question because I landed on the 2 or the 9, if you will, and that made it also somewhat unresolute. I do notice that, and I especially notice it when I'm teaching it to you guys, which is one of the reasons I do it, because it makes me think about what I'm doing. Because if I were to just the thing is, even if I were to just play, like here, experiment. I'm just gonna play some shit without even thinking about it, and then see what happens and see what I notice, and then I'll explain that. Dominant 7 in there when I shouldn't. nobody needs to point that out. But anyway, what I just played, I was noticing what I was doing. I was noticing the motifs, so like, and then progressing on them. That's how you know what to progress on. It's by noticing, like, I just noticed that, like that, and it's very simple, like 7-5-3-1 of the 2 of the G minor, but now, like, when you hear that idea, something else naturally comes to you that it connects with that idea, even if it's something that's very, like, distant. Like, what if I did that's still related because it's the same contour, but it's like a different key in a different mode, or maybe that's even more specifically related if I go there, and I was doing a tritone away, right? And then when I did this, it was a tritone away, but using the 9, 7, 5, and 3 of a tritone away of the C sharp, but it's still motivic development, and I'm still noticing it. And okay, check out what just happened there. I played a second. I played a major second by accident, and then because I heard that, I naturally progressed forward using that major second. And that's what happens when you're in the moment. You notice it, and then you can use it all sorts, and it can be anywhere, like, because it's a musical piece now, and so now you can express it with contour, up or down, or intervals of stacked major thirds, or like intervals of major seconds. And when I say that, I'm talking about the top note of the last phrase and the bottom note of the next phrase, obviously. And so it becomes this musical piece of vocabulary, and if you have enough facility and you know your modes, then you can extrapolate upon that idea and say something specific with it. And just to show how it compounds when you're in the moment, just there I did a hemiola also. I like put a different time signature over the 4/4, and then I was keeping the 4/4 in my mind and realigned it eventually. So then you had this second idea that then expanded into like more seconds and more dissonance, layering over the time, which was then being extrapolated upon in this other way that was doing the I think it was like a 3 or something. I'll have to go back and listen, over the 4, that then realigns at the same time as you are creating this melodic concept using the vocabulary that you had started with because you were in the moment and improvising and listening to what you were playing. This is not something you can really do consciously. I'm not thinking, now I'm going to go into a 3/4 hemiola and then come back on this bar and plan ahead. It's none of that. It's like I'm in the moment and I'm listening to myself. And if I'm playing in a band context, I'm listening to the people around me. So that's how you can create these layers. Like you have your top layer, let's just call the top layer here melody, and I'm going to lay it out this way because it's a horizontal camera. So your melody here, and then you have your harmony, and so this could be melody, and then the harmony could be your harmony, the dissonance there. If you that could be the part of the harmony there, because so then you have a dominant. It's like you're using the F Dorian F Mixolydian mode. If that's your harmony, and then on top of that you have time. So melody, harmony, time, which are not in that order specifically. They could be interchanged. And so like if you're on 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, that's an idea that incorporates all 3 of those elements in some sort of interesting way. Now it doesn't sound, obviously that's like an annoying fucking thing to just keep repeating that, but if you're listening to yourself and you're actually playing and moving forward with the idea, you're not going to repeat it. You're going to go. an idea there that's actually kind of cool. Okay, let's see. We've got a lot of really good questions here. Thank you guys for participating in this. This is awesome. I feel like every time I do this, there are more people who are engaging, and I really appreciate that, guys. Frank. That's really funny. I love that. I knew, thanks for the comment, Frank Wonder. That's really funny. I could tell you that actually, but I would say, Frank, my answer to you is accept your girlfriend's head, and if you really can't handle it, you need to get a good girl, sorry, not a good, you need to get a different girlfriend, because she's not going to change the way that her head is shaped, even if she works out. I'm sorry. You can approach somebody about the health of their body, but not about the shape of their head, Frank. It's an unfortunate situation for you and for her. I'm sorry. Anyway, let's move forward. As a beginner, how to prioritize, what to practice, and avoid information overload. Okay, that's a hugely important thing. Let's see, prioritizing what you practice. As a beginner, don't practice too much. Don't overload yourself because you'll stop. The most important thing is that you continue. I would recommend when you start, do 30 minutes a day, and just start with the basics of technicality. There's a great book called Dozen a Day. My mom is a piano teacher back in Chicago, and she teaches kids. So I grew up listening to all these kids exercises, though I never really studied that much with her myself, and I didn't learn these exercises myself, but for a beginner, it's really important to get the basics down in some sort of fun way. So maybe get the book called Dozen a Day, which is an exercise book for kids, and it has stuff like hot cross buns and things. It's really, really good to learn and start to get your layout of the keyboard. And then, so do that for 10 minutes, and then for another 10 minutes, maybe so here's where listening is really important. It's important to listen to some music, even if it's more advanced than you could play. But like, listen to some simple Mozart pieces. There are some very basic Mozart pieces that actually beginners can play too. And eventually you'll learn to play them, but I would spend like 5 minutes listening. So 10 minutes on some simple basic exercises, 5 minutes listening, 5 minutes studying the basic like theory, which starts with modes. I have videos on modes, and then extrapolates out from there. And then 10 minutes playing. That's something that a lot of people forget, is to play and have fun. Like, really play. Like, just even if you can't play that well, you have to start somewhere. Like, I started a blog, and I'm not good at blogging, but I do it every day, and eventually I'll get good at it. It's at spiro.blogs.com, by the way. It's a little hidden because I'm not good at it yet. spero.blogs.com. And it doesn't have to do with piano, so you may not be interested in it. It just has to do with life. But yeah, so the 10 minutes on basic exercises that are kind of fun, 5 minutes listening, 5 minutes on theory, and 10 minutes just playing. Like, mess around with the keyboard. It doesn't matter what you, like, you can play random shit, or pick a mode, and just play in it, and see what sounds you can make. It doesn't matter if you can comp or do anything that is complicated at all. No pun intended, because comp actually stands for accompaniment. But play with the piano and listen to it and enjoy it. That's the only way that you will become one with it, in the sense that you can use it as this tool, like you use your voice box and your mouth when you speak. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, and Rachel, when I don't know what I was saying when you asked that question, but you should transcribe melody. If you can transcribe chords, I would. I've done that sometimes with people, but it's harder. It's a really good exercise to try to transcribe a chord. It's great ear training. but start with melody if you can't do chords. I'm not afraid of copying because of transcribing, because as soon as you study the tenets of music, which are the main thing that I teach here, you won't be copying, because it requires you to not copy. People who copy end up not paying attention to goal notes, or to, if you're paying attention to motifs and goal notes, you can't copy. You can't play what somebody else has played in its entirety, because then you're not thinking about where you're ending up. You're just thinking about executing that same thing. That's the great thing about playing classical music, is you know the notes you're going to play and you know where you're ending up, so you can think about other aspects of it and get better at certain facets of the music because of that. That's why classical players are stronger in certain areas and weaker in other areas, like improvisation, for example, which I have some videos specifically for classical music players to learn, which I'm going to be putting more of them out soon. It takes a little while to edit these, but anyway, where was that? Yeah, copying because of transcribing. You're not gonna. You should transcribe, and you shouldn't be worried about copying. I was when I was younger, and I shouldn't have been, because I needed more. I needed more transcribing. I needed more McCoy-Tyner vocabulary, and I needed to study them. And don't just learn to play what they play. Think about why they're playing what they play, even in ways that they weren't thinking about when they were playing it. Herbie, for example, never thinks about the motivic use he doesn't think about motivic development, but his playing is one of the most beautiful motivic development out of any of the pianists. So study his motivic development and intellectualize it and learn it, but then when you're doing your own, don't just play Herbie's motifs, play your ideas that come to you, and it starts with a note, or it starts with 2 or 3, and when you start with that basic of a cell, you're going to extrapolate upon your own ideas, and you're not going to copy, even if you have transcribed and learned from others. It's all references also, by the way. Even the scale, why do you think we have a 12-note? Why does that exist? There's a whole line of history stemming from the use of in Gregorian chant, experimenting with the overtone series, this isn't a perfect representation of the overtone series by any way, by any means, but Gregorian chant was just human beings using their voices and singing things that aligned or misaligned in certain ways, and then that turned into counterpoint, which then used that overtone series in a certain way then when Bach got a hold of it and he created he utilized the equal tempered tuning system that shifted everything so you could switch between keys, but made it so nothing is perfect. And so there are these accidents of history and things that became popular that are all built on human beings experimenting with sound. So it's all references based from now way, way back to that point, to an infinite, it's an infinite history that is as old as human beings and even living organisms that we're reaching back to, and it's all references. So there's nothing original in the first place. That doesn't mean copy. It's not an excuse to copy, because what you play should be something that's coming through you. But don't be afraid if you sound a little bit like somebody else, because we're all going to sound a little bit like somebody else, because everything we're playing is based on the entirety of musical history of everybody else in the first place. That's something Quincy Jones said too. He said there are only 12 notes, and they've all been used in every possible way. So, you're not creating anything new. You're creating your voice within the context of a lot of history and reference. It's kind of a freeing thing to understand that. Let's see, where were we? Yeah, this has a lot of answers in it, actually, so I will keep this up. I'm going to refresh this Patreon page for my patrons, just to see if there were any questions that were put on there. Okay, no, we're still with the live questions. For those of you, if you're a Patreon person that's like putting your questions in here, say it so that I know that it's you. I'll focus on those questions. And if you're not a Patreon member, it's in the description of this video if you want to become one. Does it help think in scales in terms of 4 notes, like breaking a scale in half? I don't think so. It helps to use motifs, but a motif could be 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, 6 notes, and it doesn't have to be scalar. If you're going to use a scale, if you're going to start with something and try to make it basic, don't use half of the scale. Use the pentatonic scale, which is 5 notes. That's C major pentatonic. And a lot of the history of musical development within human beings, dating back to like the caveman era, where there are bone flutes carved with the pentatonic scale in it, has those 5 notes. Yes, it has an Eastern twinge to it because that is the scale that we associate a lot of Chinese music with, largely because of the cliches and the simplicity, because Chinese music actually uses, Chinese traditional music uses a wide tuning system and very different scales, not just the pentatonic scale. And Indian music uses an even broader spectrum of scales with quarter tones. But if you so dating back to the most simple use of music of scales, the pentatonic scale is something that is historically relevant to every culture. And you even notice that in Chick Corea's playing, he uses pentatonic stuff a lot, or like minor pentatonic. Also take that minor pentatonic and modulate it like that all sucked, but you get what I'm talking about. That's something McCoy Tyner does. Yeah, he'll like lay on some slightly dissonant comping here and use that pentatonic scale, but move it all over like. That's not a great example, but if you and when he's doing that, he's thinking like this would be like D minor pentatonic to E flat minor, to D flat minor pentatonic to B minor pentatonic to A flat minor pentatonic to F sharp minor pentatonic, and then but doing ideas, question and answers within the context of that pentatonic scale that's moving around. Okay. Let's see here. Tetrachords? I don't know what a tetrachord is. Rachel, what's a tetrachord? Oh wait, tetra. I guess tetra. Does tetra mean 4? Like tetrahedron? I don't know. If anybody wants to answer that in the chat, please do. Okay, somebody asked, George, you asked what harmonic major and dominant is, and I'm going to give you priority because you gave me $5. Thank you, again. The harmonic major and dominant. Harmonic major is not a thing. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, because there's some great pianists in this feed right now. But it's major scale. And then when you have a dominant, the dominant is called dominant because it is the one that is upper that goes to the lower. So G7 is the dominant of C major. And G7 is G7 because it's using the C major mode, but it starts on G, and if you go up the scale, that 7, if you were playing G major 7, that 7 would be sharped, because the G major scale has an F sharp. And you have a major scale because you have whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's the major scale in any key. So like C sharp major is this, F sharp major is that. So G major, and then G dominant 7, G dominant, which has the flat 7, has that F sharp, which would be sharped, and it's flatted. And that leads to the 1. Now, there's a reason for that. I'll just explain that. I'll extrapolate upon this a little bit more. Now, if you're looking at G, that dominant 7 interacts with the 3 of G in a very interesting way. The 3 of G and the dominant 7 have what's called a tritone. It's called a tritone because it has 3 whole steps in it. Tri. It goes back to the Gregorian chant days where they had whole steps, and if they had 3 whole steps, they stacked them and they created a tritone, which is the most dissonant interval that you can have without being a minor second. So if you're going up this scale, most dissonant possible interval, and it resolves by each of these two, this going up a half step and this going down a half step. So the 3 of the 5 going up a half step to the 1 of the 1, and the dominant 7 of the 5 going down a half step to the 3 of the 1. So 3 7 to 1 3. And that's the basis of literally all Western music. The tritone going inwards. At least all modern Western music, until you get to the atonal music, which has a whole different set of rules. But this is like when you have your 5 to the 1, that's why the 5 goes to the 1. So you can use that to your advantage when you're soloing. If you get to the more advanced levels and you want to know which goal notes to pick the 3 of the 5 moving to the 1 of the 1, and pick the 7 of the 5 moving to the 3 of the 1, and then you have lines like, even that's so simple, but it's beautiful. Your ear hears the 3 and the 7 of the 5 going to the 1 and the 3 of the 1. Now check this out. In dark harmony, which is a really cool and abstracted concept, but was used since Bach and before it, but we forgot about it a lot now. You think of minor scales as major scales flipped upside down on their heads. So instead of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1, you have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1. The same intervals going up, going down here. So that's like whole step, half step, whole step, half step. This is your 1, and this is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Now the tritone here in upside down harmony is this, because this would be your 7. If this is the 1 and you're looking upside down, this is your 7, and that goes to the 1. And if this is your 1 and you're going upside down, then this is well, okay, let me flip it back up and talk in diatonic terms. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1. Let's just call this the 4, because we understand that the 4 is the dominant 7 of the 5 chord, right? All right, and we understand the 7 is the 3 of the 5 chord. If G is the 5 chord, this is the 3 and the 7, and this is the 1, and this is the 1 and the 3 of the 1. Okay, so let's just call this the 7 and the 4 and relate it to the 1. If you flip it upside down, now you're going that way. This is the 7, and this is the 4. Because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is the 7. Okay, so this 4 leads up to the 3, and the 7 leads down to the 1, and you're upside down now. So if you're playing in C minor, and thinking of it in dark harmony terms, which is the proper way to actually think about it, theory-wise, this is your dominant 5, and this is your 1. And there's a reason that you call this the subdominant, because This is the one, this is the tonic, this is the dominant, this is the one, this is the subdominant. If you flip it upside down, this is the reverse 5. And then this is your tritone that's going inwards to this. This is your tritone, the 7 and the 4 leading to the 1 and the 3 upside down. The 1 being the G in this case. Because when you create dark harmony, you're taking the 5th and you're flipping the 5th on its head, because the 5th is the most defining, it's the only actual defining interval in a key to do a key center when you have a 1 and a 5, because this is obviously the 5 and this is obviously the 1 in that case, if those are the only 2 notes that you have. All right. Goal notes going to this, and this is your powerful other goal notes. And this is a lot more complicated than anything I've done in videos before, because I'm talking about 2 goal notes that are happening at the same time that can be alternated. It's a goal note counterpoint, if you will. And this is upside down harmony. So we have layers of complexity here. So that's the idea of, if you were following me there, you could see that I'm focusing on this note and this note leading to this note and this note, which is the basis of all harmony upside down. And then right side up, it's that this and this tritone to here, which can, by the way, once you do that, be extrapolated out even further. So check this out. This is an interesting little trick. What did I just do there? Okay, tritone here, leading to the 1. Obviously, we're in G7, G, which is the dominant, to C major. Now, G7 to a new one, which is a tritone away from C major. How did that happen? Because this is a tritone still that, instead of resolving inwards, you can resolve outwards to a minor 6th. This is a tritone to a major 3rd or a tritone to a minor 6th. And if you're just improvising freely, that can be really freeing in your harmonic landscape, because now you can go to literally any key that you want to, instead of going from 5 to 1, you go from 5 to the new one, which is actually a half step below. And then you can go back to the 1. Or, and then you can make that dominant, and then go to a new key. Now we're in B. And we got there through this, through very, very subtle harmonic twists that all make sense. And this is what classical composers do. But this is also what Herbie uses. Herbie is a big fan of Bartók. He got a lot of what he does harmonically from Bartók. And then Ravel. Anyway, I'm going to stop that particular thing there, but let me know if you want more in that specific vein. George, I hope that gives you some food for thought. I'm going to scroll to the bottom here. There's some really great questions here. Man. All right. And then, by the way, Patreons, I'm still going back to the Patreon page and checking for questions. If you, on that new post I just made, if you want to make questions there, I'll make them the priority. Oh, yeah, Berenger. The Oscar, I don't even know how to pronounce that, if it's Berenger or Berenger. I think it's Berenger, but Oscar Berenger is the one with the The daily technical studies, Denalo. That's correct. I have those. I think I put the book up on one of these videos as just like a free download, well, stolen download sort of. Sorry, Oscar. It's probably out of copyright law anyway now. I don't know how many years it's been, but that's a book that I do. I do that every day. Also, I do the exercises. And so on and so forth. It's really helpful. I do that for like 20 minutes a day, and I start slowly, and I use a metronome, and I put the metronome on odd beats, which I have a thing about how to learn time. That's in the how to learn time video, where you put the metronome on a beat that's unexpected. And this is something that Ruslan Sirota showed me too. You make it on a beat that's elongated and unexpected, so you have to keep the time yourself as you are flowing through and doing these exercises. It makes you internalize it. It's really helpful. Improving your blues soloing, Alex. You've had trouble finding musicians actually really well versed on. Yeah, well, because blues musicians don't really study theory, actually. At least, except for a few of the really great contemporary blues musicians. Blues is based on feel. The original blues musicians didn't think about really anything. You go back to Robert Johnson and the old, like, their guitars were out of tune. They were playing singing mostly pentatonic melodies, and playing chords not in any specific time structure. The blues progression was made later, after the original blues era, that when it was codified into the jazz world, and they wanted to emulate that and actually do the 12-bar thing. In original blues music, they didn't even count the bars. They would just go to the next key when it felt like it should go to the next key. That's one of the reasons that blues is so compelling from that original blues era, because that when they were doing that, it was so visceral and speech-like that it connected on a deep level, especially with the pain that the people who were composing were feeling at the time, because it was during the time of, like, obviously it was in like the late 19th century, early 20th century, and blues and country music were kind of synonymous, but the blues music was played by African Americans, and who were largely terribly oppressed and had terrible lifestyles at the time. I mean, there's still a lot of oppression going on, but that's a totally different conversation. They were expressing this. It's the blues. It's like what you know, it's the blues for a reason. And there was no education, there was no studying, it was just feel. And so that's why you don't have a lot of blues musicians that really know the technicalities of harmony and time, but they can be incorporated, and it's very powerful when you do, because then you can use all this other stuff, but then it becomes not really blues. You use the blues, but everything we do uses the blues. Everything I play uses the blues to some extent. And the blues is what originated the, like, minor, major rub. And you hear that even a lot today, like in Brad Meldau's playing. And Chicoria. But then if you really know what you're doing, then you use that as, like, the sharp 9 and the 3 in a blues progression. Then go back to the 1. But then, like, use that for the 6, you go down to the 6, and you can use that same. So you use those pieces of theory, and you use the blues, some snippets and tenets from the blues in your modern voice, which is much different than just the blues. You never are just playing the blues. I don't know if the blues can be played now. I think the blues was captured at the point in history when it was made, and it was a thing that is that like, it's like you're not gonna write a novel in Old English now, but elements of Old English are incorporated into our current speech, and our current speech wouldn't be what it is without it. But if you read a book in actual Old English, you can't understand what the fuck it is, what it's saying. Anyway, I hope that answers that a little bit. Oh yeah, but then, okay, Chris, though, you have a great point. If you look at rock, it incorporates the blues just as much as jazz, even more so because it's simpler. So, if you really want to like understand where the lineage of the blues went, look at rock. Look at the people who studied with and hung out with Buddy Guy, like the Rolling Stones, for example, and yeah, and Eric Clapton, and just anything that came after that. It was all influenced by the blues. Okay, Carrie, how to focus as an intermediate without getting overwhelmed. Limit your practice time every day. First, you have to compartmentalize and limit. That's why I did a 110-minute practice schedule in my last video. If you can do that, you should do it. And don't do more, because you'll overwhelm yourself. But if you do that every day, then you'll keep progressing. And the goal is to be practicing the same a year from now and not burn yourself out. So the way to not overwhelm yourself is be thoughtful about the things you need to improve. You should get a teacher. I teach, by the way, sometimes. You should get a teacher who can critique you and lay out a practice schedule for you and stick to that practice schedule. Or if you can't afford a teacher at the moment, just watch my videos and make a practice schedule for yourself, because oftentimes we know what we need to improve. And if you don't know what you need to improve, record yourself playing and listen to it, and then pretend it's somebody else and say, okay, if I were teaching this person, what would I tell them they need to improve? If it's time, then go to my time exercise where you use a metronome in different ways, and go learn Latin piano. Go to the Learn Latin Piano video, because learning montunos, like being able to do what is like is very powerful in your timing, in your sense of time for everything, because you have to play mostly on offbeats, especially in Afro-Cuban music. So study some Afro-Cuban music if you need to learn time. Study classical if you need to learn theory. Transcribe every day, but compartmentalize your practice schedule and lay it out for yourself, and do it every day, and check off boxes so you have some sort of little reward system, and don't do more than that to not overwhelm yourself. Miracle voicings? I don't know. Carrie, that sounds great. I'll be around. I'll put my email in here in case anybody wants to connect for lessons. I do Skype lessons. Anyway, I don't know what a miracle voicing is. I'm sorry. Maybe you can explain it to me, Black Deuce. You know, the real lucky man, I think about that a lot. I think about the new generation of jazz artists, and I'm foregoing opinion, because there are some players. I feel like this world tends to be obsessed with virtuosity, and there's some players that are very virtuosic at a very young age, but it doesn't mean that is going to result in anything that is culturally developmental. I feel like the greatest aspects of our culture come from people who are humbled by the world and introspective and not specifically focused on virtuosity. And I think actually a lot of the younger generation is specifically focused on virtuosity, because that's what gets people famous, because that's what you can put on Instagram, and in 1 minute you can say, oh my god, that person's amazing, and then that Instagram thing gets spread, and then they get famous and they sell a bunch of records, and everybody thinks they're the greatest musician, but they're not. And they might be, but at that young of an age, it's really hard to tell. And if you talk to any of the really great musicians, the things you hear about what music is different and has very, very little to do with technicality. We're all talking about the technicality now because we have to get that as our as our baseline in order to communicate on the instrument. But the goal is to get past it, and you can only create great music if you have that other side where you dive deeper, and you're saying something. And that's what we're talking about. That's what I'm trying to teach you guys in these methods. And it's an abstracted concept, and there are different ways to get there. But I feel like we're progressing there together, and I study it every day. Oh, I'm getting tired, guys. I think I'm gonna finish this up. Oh, well, I'll answer that last question. Tedalini, you're welcome to Real Lucky Man. Tedalini, the 251 rootless voicings, you just have to practice. So running them in the circle of fifths. So, okay, if you've been running them in the circle of fifths, which you should do, and that hasn't been helping, run them over tunes. So, pick Blue Bossa, pick Autumn Leaves, pick Stella by Starlight. Those will be very helpful. And run those rootless voicings through first out of time. So if it's Autumn Leaves, like, make sure you know how to do. Something like that. There are a lot of different voicings you can use, and then put a metronome on and be able to go like. Be able to do that with the metronome. Yeah, and then go through more tunes. It's really helpful. But you should also then learn the melodies of those tunes and be able to comp with your left hand. And that will help you ingrain that, not just going through the circle of fifths, but doing it over tunes. And there are thousands of tunes that you could use. Start with Autumn Leaves if you don't know it, and master it. Do it really well, and do it in all the keys if you have time. That'll keep you busy for several months. No, I don't have perfect pitch. I've good relative pitch because I studied it a lot. And you can practice relative pitch. I don't know if you can learn perfect pitch. There are debates about it, and I haven't learned it. But you can definitely practice relative pitch, and I actually have exercises in here to practice relative pitch. If you go back through my videos, I think they're exercises for ear training, I think is what they're called. Yeah, and a few jazz songs to know by heart: Bye Bye Blackbird, Stella by Starlight, Blue Bossa, Autumn Leaves. Oh man, Yesterdays, that's a great one. It's hard to remember them. I have a whole list. In fact, let me just find this list. Maybe this will be helpful if I just give you this list. Because I have a tunes you know list that I bring to jam sessions, so that I can actually remember. Tunes you know. Oh, tunes to call, that's what it is. Woo! That's, alright, here. Boom. I'm just going to copy and paste this list for you. Here's the list of tunes that I like to call. Boom. Woo! That's a lot, and so, oh shit. No, 733 out of 200 characters. I can't do that. It won't let me. Sorry. Where should I put this up? Maybe I can put it as a comment after it finishes. Here's the list of tunes I know. There we go. I like to call. Now I think I can make that a comment. There. Boom. Okay, it's in the comments of this, not in the chat. Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to be notified of the future ones, please sign up for the Patreon campaign. It's very helpful. Anything that you guys want to contribute, it's in the description of this video. And then I let my Patreons know of the location for every Sunday that we do these. Sometimes they're public, sometimes they're private. I might keep them public, but let the Patreons pick the subject matter for the video. Within the Patreon system is where I'll have that message where I call it out for next week. So anyway, thank you again. It's really, really amazing to be communicating with so many good pianists who are learning and exploring along with me. And we'll do it again next week. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.